from the Audit Committee and the Finance Committee. So did any of you wish to start first? Howard, you want to go first?
Yep.
On the scrutiny items.
Yep. So just in terms of the key areas of responsibility, obviously fundamentally the financial results and position of the trust, for which we monitor that very closely, and as I mentioned, for the first half we are pretty comfortable overall, but we will be looking very closely as to what happens in the second half, because the fundamental basis changes from the first half to the second half. So the first half has been funded by these block contracts and top-ups, all of which have served us well to achieve our balanced position. However, that changes from the 1st of October effectively, and we are now effectively financially part of the ICS, and therefore we are running a deficit. Certainly for October, the deficit is 590,000, and we expect that to continue for each month roughly for the remainder of the period. Now, I have asked the executive around this arrangement, because it implies that the ICS elsewhere is hanging on to a surplus, and that overall they are balanced, but that we, as in our sort of financial or governance perspective, we are still nevertheless sitting on a deficit, but I am assured that's okay, provided the ICS overall remains balanced, and so we will be constantly monitoring that and getting assurance from David Hammond in particular that the ICS is balanced. From an operational performance, obviously that's been the key area of responsibility, which we've covered fairly extensively today, and our performance on category in 1 to 4, and obviously the strategic longer term nature of that exercise that we're requiring from the executive to give us that assurance. In terms of the areas of focus, as you will have seen from some of the papers, CAS 111, new 111 system, we monitored that carefully up until implementation, and we will now be monitoring that closely from a service delivery point of view, noting that there are some issues around call performance on that, but we need to monitor that very closely now that it's gone live. But I mean, that was I think a huge success for the organisation. Had some significant challenges, but those were all effectively overcome. There's one or two things that need to be addressed regarding the electronic prescription service and approval by NHS Digital, but nevertheless that was a great success in getting that alive, and puts us in a very, very good position. But we as FIC just need to monitor that additional service. We've covered the improvement plan that we've been through, and also the other key areas of focus have been the estates strategy and the fleet strategy. And I think there are some pretty significant areas of progress being made on that front that we mentioned. So Brighton going live, the Make Ready Centre there going live right now, and also the approvals that have now been given for the other Make Ready centres in Banstead and Medway should put us in a very strong footing but obviously those approvals were an area of focus for the FIC over the past few months. I mean, in terms of future plans, the main one, I think, is the strategic plan that we've talked about around performance improvement and resilience. And also, as I mentioned earlier, about monitoring closely the financial position now that it has changed significantly in the second half. We need to monitor that very closely and stay close to our ICS partners to make sure that's all in good shape. And then finally, obviously, of great focus at the moment is the winter and the EU exit planning, combined with the COVID, particularly in Kent. So there's a sort of perfect storm developing in Kent at the moment with COVID, and obviously a key area for the EU exit, as well as the winter. So keeping a close eye on that from an operational point of view will be key for us. So those are the main points around that. In terms of the terms of reference, and I think that there are no particular changes proposed, but open up for questions on that, and likewise on the cycle of business for the remainder of this year. I don't think we have finally drawn up one for next year yet, but so the areas of focus are set out in the cycle for January and March next year. So those are set out there. So really open that up for questions, really.
Thank you, Howard. Given that you've had to settle into this role as well through remote working, your grasp of detail is very impressive. So thank you for what you're doing there. And just to make the point to colleagues, the integrated care system, which Howard referred to, the ICS, is the method in which the NHS increasingly will receive its funds. So there'll be more emphasis on of the integrated care system working collaboratively. So that's ourselves with our colleagues in the hospital sector and in primary care, working together within a global budget for an area such as Surrey, for instance, or Sussex or Kent. And that will present us some challenges going forward in terms of how that money comes to us and how we manage it. So the landscape is changing in terms of accountability. So any questions of Howard as Chair of Finance and Investment Committee in terms of what he's told you about the work of the committee, and in particular about the future plans of their future work plan? Are you content that there is sufficient scrutiny and strategic thinking going into managing the trust finances? I think, Howard, you've given them so much detail, no one's asked a question unless they're all still on their breaks. Any questions at all? I've just got several blank screens at the moment because people have got their cameras turned off, but I'm assuming then that silence is content. People are content. Okay, thank you indeed. Let's move on then to the Audit Committee, and I think Michael is chair of the Audit Committee, the Committee of Committees. Are you going to give us your presentation, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair, and good morning to everybody. Can I do this in 3 sections? The Audit Committee is a little bit unusual, so I will start in a moment with just a bit of background as to what our role is. I'll go in then to what we've covered in the last 12 months since I came to the Council last time. And then I'd like to use the opportunity to draw out some systemic issues which would hopefully give the Council assurance as to the issues which the non-executives will be focusing on going forward. If I start with our role, as David said, it is quite unique. Each chair of the other committees is a member of the Audit Committee. So the first thing I'd say is it gives us a very good cross-foundation, perspective of how the organisation is operating. We are primarily focused with governance, and I just remind people what governance means. It's quite a strange term, but on the one hand, it is about protecting the organisation, making sure that it uses its resources appropriately in accordance with things like managing public money issued by the Treasury. But for governance to be effective, it should be an enabler. It should create the environment in which good decisions can be made to benefit all those whom we serve in the community, but also to support CCAM people. We take assurance from a number of sources. We take assurance from internal audit and external audit, both of which are external to CCAM and are appointed competitively. KPMG are external auditors, RS Tenon are internal auditors. They have to comply with their own professional standards to ensure that the evidence that they provide is robust. We also take assurance from some benchmarking. We look at how we perform vis-a-vis others in the ambulance community. And we also look at the assurance map. This is the way in which the organisation maps out all the different controls and flows of information that help the executive be confident that their operations are performing effectively. So that's what we do. If I then go on to what we've done in the last year since I last came to the council, well, first and foremost, one of the big highlights of the year has been, believe it or not, I hate to say this, the external audit report, because we got a clear audit opinion in terms of our financial statements, but more importantly, we also got a clear audit opinion in terms of our use of resources. That's the main indicator by which the external auditors gain confidence whether we are delivering value for money. And you may recall that for a number of years, the VFM element of our financial audit, or of our audit, has been qualified. So this year was a good result that qualification was removed. The work that we focused on has been a mix of ongoing systemic look at all and operations of CCAM, and by that I mean we had a series of reports looking at procurement, health and safety, complaints handling, financial management, data security, and how well we were performing in terms of minimising fraud. Most of those reports gave reasonable or partial assurance, which should give you the assurance that our governance is operating effectively. There were other incidents throughout the year where we had to focus because they were unusual. So I mentioned earlier the 111 CAS programme. We were very keen to be absolutely confident that those systems, those approaches were working effectively. We also needed to be confident about COVID and, as I mentioned earlier, preparations for Brexit. That's very much about the committee being responsive to new things that the agency, that the Foundation Trust faces, and ensuring that we've got the controls and processes operating as they should be. So I hope I can give you the assurance that the Audit Committee has a good programme of work, is drawing on independence information to give the level of assurance that we need. If I could go on to possibly the more interesting aspects for me is, what does our work tell us about the systemic issues that the organisation faces, and what do we need to focus on going forward? And I'd like to make 3 points, and hopefully they build on some of the observations that have been made by governors in their questions earlier this morning. The first, I'd say this: wherever there is a major new initiative, like making the bid for 111, that it's effective. Other examples, the response to COVID. Wherever there is a problem, I wouldn't want to be with anybody else than CCAM staff, because they rise to the challenge, they come together, they use their resources, they're highly motivated. So in dealing with short-term problems, I think the organisation is excellent. Where we have got more to do, and this is a glass full, half full rather than half empty, is getting much better at dealing with long-term issues so that we get long-term resilience built into the way in which CCAM does things. So this is really about taking a longer-term perspective, getting our planning right, making sure that all of our activities, whether it's fleet, people, rostering, management information, are sufficiently integrated that we are resilient in the longer term. And my experience prior to joining CCAM is that organisations get that right, are much more resilient, and actually it's better for the employees within the organisation because it's not this constant high level of activity trying to sometimes impossible. Now, in fairness to the executive, I know talking to Philip and other members of the executive team, they get this. And I know Philip is looking at his structure and looking at his information flows. But I think that is the challenge that we face going forward as an organisation. And I know that is very much that David as chair, Lucy, all of us are very focused on in supporting the executive. And I think it's an interesting issue that the council might return to next year. Have we got that longer term perspective, that longer term planning that right? And I think we are beginning to see that, but we've got further to go. And the other point I'd say is around our assurance mapping. I think we have got good assurance mapping, but it doesn't always operate as effectively as it could do. I think Madeline asked the question quite rightly about medical education. I would argue that our assurance mechanism should have highlighted that sooner than they did. I think we recognise that, we are seeking to remedy it. But assurance mapping, assurance systems should be sufficiently effective to enable the organisation to anticipate problems as soon as they emerge, or in anticipation of their emerging, so that our response is much more tailored. So I've tried to give you an open and frank assessment of where we're going. None of this is insurmountable. The assurance that you should take is that we recognise that we need to do more in these spaces, and we are very much focused on doing so. So David, thank you very much. That's all I really wanted to say.
Thank you, Michael. That's very, very comprehensive. And before I put it up to question, just to note in our papers as well, we have got the Governor's observation report on the work of the Finance Investment Committee as well, which is before you. Colleagues, questions of Howard? If there's any more questions for Howard, but also of Michael now, when he's take me through the work of the Audit Committee and our agendas. I'll say a question. I think Brian?
Not a question, Chair. Most of you know that my background has been as working as a finance director in organisations, and I have to say, having observed both the Finance Committee and work with Michael as well, I think not a question, but I think we are lucky as an organisation to have the services that we enjoy in that area. So there are clearly issues that need to be looked at, but actually the fact that they're mapped out and actually gives me a level of assurance in general, even though we recognise there are specific areas that still need to be actually looked at.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'd say, just question the word luck. I think it was actually you, the governors, should take a round of applause for your recruitment practices. So
I didn't like to say that I was a newish member of the nominations committee, Chair, but no. Yeah,
it wasn't just luck. Michael was recruited, as was Howard. He wasn't luck. Yeah.
No, okay, but the wrong word. We are fortunate, shall we say, to
yeah. Other comments. I think just also, Michael, thank you for your use of plain English. Going back where we started the meeting regarding jargon busting and acronyms, the world of audit and particularly of assurance can be full of terms that very few people can understand. So you have made it come alive there to make sure that we are making sure that there's value for money, but also that we're doing things in a quality way in the interest of the public and our staff, and it all joins up at the Audit Committee. Absolutely. Okay, so we are content then to receive Michael's report and also support the sort of work plan going forward, which the headline term is resilience, ensuring that CCAM is fit for the future. Okay, thank you for that. Are there any other items of urgent business? I'm now only 4 minutes behind time, so no other business. Now we move on to questions from our public. And I think, Katie, you noticed 1 or 2 questions earlier on that people wanted to get in. So hopefully the people you noticed wanted to ask questions early part of the agenda are going to come forth and ask their questions now.
I think it was in the context of what was discussed in the meeting, but it was Emma Saunders, the staff engagement lead, and she's picked it up offline with Terry and Marcia, and I think it was around points about engaging with support staff. But other than that, I don't have any questions submitted in advance.
Okay, thank you. But importantly, we dealt with Emma's. I didn't want Emma's point to be ignored, so Emma's getting pointed in the right direction. Thank you for that. Any questions from the public, being our wider staff or the colleagues listening in today to the meeting? Assuming they've still been able to hang on in there and listen to the whole meeting. Gosh, there's a danger we might finish on time here. No more questions? Comments? Thank you for that. Areas to highlight to non-executive directors, and I think Izzy, I think you'll have captured the key items, but what was really coming across to me was this word resilience and balance, to make sure the pursuit of performance is met with suitable sensitivity. That's certainly one of Malcolm's key points, which I think we need to ensure is captured in our future communications with staff. I think there was scope there for, as we seek a more organised, better, more efficient organisation. We don't want to lose that in translation. That also means a good place to work as well. Mm-hmm. Any other headlines, Isabel, that you've captured? Do we need to assure our colleagues that we've been listening?
I would have to go back and review the minutes, I'm afraid. Got
right.
12 pages of notes though, so
right.
this
we'll have a comprehensive note, but I think that's across to me. The other one I think was coming across was around presentation of reports, not only in terms of the written medium, in terms of making sure we write in plain English with a suitable glossary of terms, but also we look at our colour coding to ensure that matters such as staff assaults, etc., come out with appropriate importance, or shine out from the page rather than be lost in the detail. So the combination of what I've just said and Isabel's scrupulous notes, we will make sure that we've not lost the essence of the meeting. Okay, meeting effectiveness. Has everyone had their say?
Thank you.
All had due airtime. We've got matters scrutinised. And our next meeting is on the 4th of March, which regrettably will be by this medium as well, because even if we have going back to Philip's report, we're out there with Courageous or what other vaccine we're going to be using, it's going to take some time to get to the sufficient numbers of the public to make it safe for results to come out in large numbers. So we will be virtual, but we will bear in mind the comments regarding staff contact and while we're working in this virtual medium as well, which I thought was another key point that came out of the meeting. Okay, so thank you for that. So I think that concludes the formal part of the meeting, unless colleagues correct me otherwise. So we'll now conclude, and then if I can ask, I think we've got a separate link for the brief second part of the meeting, have we not? So if colleagues could log out, and then those that are joining next meeting, please log back in on the separate link.